They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from blood. But nobody told Agnes it would feel like drowning. She stared at the flickering TV screen, the image of her old wheelchair shining under the harsh lights of a Lagos auction. Confetti rained. A crowd roared. The number danced across the bottom, sold for $1 million. And there, smiling as if he'd just won a kingdom, was Daniel, her only son. The pain wasn't sudden. It crept in like cold through an open window. Agnes saw the scratch on the wheel guard, the ribbon tied under the seat, the one she fastened the day her husband died. It wasn't just a chair. It was memory, movement, dignity. She turned up the volume with trembling fingers. Maybe if she heard more, it would hurt less. It didn't. The screen flashed Daniel's name again. Cameras exploded in white. He waved like a king. And somewhere inside Agnes, something cracked. Not loudly, not violently, but deeply. The kind of crack that spread slowly through old foundations. Agnes lived in a small bungalow in Surulere, not far from the busy roads, but far enough to feel forgotten. She was 68, her body slowed by age and illness, her world grown smaller by the day. The wheelchair had been her salvation, bought by her late husband, Staff Sergeant Z, a man who'd survived wars but not the final illness that took him quietly one rainy night. Before he died, he sold his last hunting rifle to afford the chair. "My queen must move with pride," he said, smoothing her hair one last time. He died 2 months later. His medals still lay in a blue tin box in their bedroom, wrapped in a clean cloth she never washed, just folded tighter. To Agnes, the chair was not just mobility. It was love made metal. It was Ezra's final promise. But to Daniel? To Daniel, it was opportunity. He had once been the pride of the street. Sharp, respectful, full of light. Teachers said he would be a great man. Neighbors swore he had a star on his forehead. But Lagos has a way of erasing soft lines. When Daniel moved to the island and tasted the life that sparkled in nightclubs and designer shops, his values drowned under waves of pride and pretense. He found friends who mocked his background, laughed at his old clothes, called his mother a burden. They measured worth in cars, watches, and bottle counts in VIP lounges. They crowned him with a new name, Dan Million, and he wore it like a mask. But shame is not something you shake off like dust. It sticks. One night, as Agnes dozed off to the soft hum of a generator, Daniel stood at her doorway. The ceiling fan ticked like a slow metronome. A neighbor's cooking filled the night with the smell of fried plantain. And in that small, still hour, Daniel swallowed a lie of his own making. "I'll borrow the chair. Sell it. Bring money. She'll be fine. I'll get her a new one, better. She has neighbors. She'll understand." He moved like a shadow, untied the small ribbon beneath the seat, lifted the chair with a friend's help. The metal brushed the doorframe with a soft metallic whine. Agnes stirred, but she did not wake. By sunrise, the chair and Daniel were gone. She waited. 1 day, 2, a week. She leaned on an old wooden stick someone left at the door. She dragged herself to the veranda, sat on a cracked stool to catch the evening sun. Her back ached. Her legs screamed. But she said nothing. Pain, she discovered, wasn't just physical. It was the long stretch to the bathroom, the small step into the kitchen, the distance between her bed and the light. Neighbors brought food. Mama TT from next door washed her wrappers and said, "God is in control." Pastor Jude came with a prayer and a soft smile. A child can lose his way, but not his home. Agnes nodded. She thanked them, then tucked her pain away, like a letter she would never send. The day of the auction began like any other. Warm sun, the hum of Lagos traffic. Her old TV flickered as she stirred soup in the kitchen. She nearly missed it. But there it was. Bright lights, velvet carpet, a crowd in suits. The auctioneer's voice high with excitement. "Special collector's wheelchair," he said, as if describing a work of art. Custom details. Celebrity interest. And then the number began to rise. Agnes watched, frozen. $100,000, $250,000, $750,000. Her hands trembled. Then, sold for $1 million. The crowd erupted. The camera panned. And there was Daniel, grinning. His watch caught the light. He looked taller somehow. Sharper. She didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Pain did not arrive like thunder. It came like a slow flood. As if her body knew that this betrayal wasn't just material. It was existential. She saw the past flash like lightning. EZ tying the ribbon. Daniel at 15, holding her hand at the burial, promising to take care of her. Where was that boy now? The news crew caught Daniel outside the hall. He laughed. What's one wheelchair compared to $1 million? The reporter chuckled. The crowd roared. Agnes turned off the volume. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Around her, the room stood still. The blue tin box lay on the shelf. A framed photo of her and EZ on their wedding day leaned slightly to the left. A fly tapped the window. Once. Twice. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Her breath shallow. God, she whispered, is this how my own son will repay me? Tears began to fall. Quiet at first, then louder, until she had to press her scarf into the corners of her eyes, desperate to hide, even from herself. Not the neighbors, not the world, just herself. She didn't want pity. She wanted justice. Anger did not roar. It simmered. She pulled herself to the bedroom. The tin box opened with a creak. Inside, medals wrapped in cloth. For bravery. For service. For duty. And there, behind the last one, a folded receipt. Ez's handwriting scrawled in blue ink. Paid in full. For my queen's freedom. Agnes pressed the note to her chest. The room felt electric, as if even the walls were listening. She walked back to the table and picked up a notepad. Her handwriting was slow. Careful. Hospital report. Medical need. Receipt. Serial number. Proof of ownership. Witnesses. Auction footage. TV clip. Lawyer. She stopped at the last word. Lawyer. She had never hired one in her life. She didn't even know how. But the thought didn't scare her. It steadied her. A knock came. 3 quick, 2 slow. Mama Titi. Come in. Agnes called, her voice firmer than before. Rice and stew, said her neighbor, holding a small cooler. Then she saw the TV screen and stopped. God, she whispered. Agnes just pointed at the screen. Daniel's face still frozen mid-smile. 2 women. 1 room. Watching the world cheer for betrayal. Eat small, Mama Titi said softly. You need strength. I need sense more than rice, Agnes replied. They tried to smile. Only one side of Agnes's mouth moved. Will you tell Pastor? Tomorrow, she said. And Daniel? When he is ready to hear, he will call. Until then, I will prepare. Later that night, Agnes picked up a second phone, an old one, saved for numbers that mattered. She scrolled. Her thumb hovered over a name she hadn't dialed in 20 years. A man who once stood beside EZ the day he received his last medal. If you ever need me, he had said, call. She did. The line rang. Once. Twice. Then a voice answered. Hello. Agnes took a breath. This is Agnes. I need help. There was a pause. Then, tell me everything. And so she did. The morning after the auction, Daniel's face was everywhere. Newspapers, blogs, WhatsApp statuses, they all sang his name. Dan Million. The miracle boy from Surler who turned a simple wheelchair into $1 million sensation. Reporters called him a genius. Influencers reposted his photo with wide-eyed emojis. One headline read, From nothing to $1 million. Lagos boy reinvents hustle. Another declared him the prince of possibility. Daniel didn't correct them. He didn't explain where the chair came from. He just smiled into the cameras and let the lie bloom. To the city, he was a hero. To his mother, he was a ghost. The money arrived like a flood. He moved into a rented duplex in Lekki with white walls, marble floors, and a gate so tall it blocked out his past. The sitting room smelled of imported leather. A Mercedes and Lexus gleamed outside, catching the sun like they belonged in a showroom. He filled the kitchen with foreign wines he couldn't pronounce. Every mirror in the house reflected a man he didn't fully recognize. But it felt good. It felt powerful. He bought chains thick enough to rattle. Watches that weighed like truth. Shoes so clean they never touched sand. He wore them like armor. Proof that the poverty he grew up in was behind him. His nights became a blur. Loud clubs, flashing lights, tables overflowing with bottles. Women he didn't know laughing like they loved him. Strangers toasted him. Dan Million, they cheered. From wheelchair to wonder. No one asked how. No one cared. And that suited Daniel just fine. What he didn't know was that back in Surler, in a quiet house with peeling paint and an empty space beside the bed, Agnes was starving. Not for food, though she ate little. Not for comfort, though her back screamed from the stool she now used in place of the wheelchair. She was starving for answers. For truth. For justice. Neighbors came. Mama Titi brought her yam porridge and fanned her while she wept silently. Pastor Jude prayed beside her, tears in his own eyes. "Your reward is in heaven," he said. She nodded but did not reply. Each night, after the generator died and the street quieted, Agnes sat in the dark and replayed the auction in her mind. Over and over. The lights. The clapping. Her chair, Ez's gift, being paraded like a trophy. Daniel's smile. His words. "What's one wheelchair compared to 1,000,000? They rang in her ears louder than the applause. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't beg God for understanding. She planned. Daniel, meanwhile, spiraled further. The thrill of success was fading. Every night had begun to feel the same. Laughter that wasn't real. Friends that stayed for bottles. Conversations without depth. Girls who left before dawn. The chair he'd sold had paid for everything. And yet, he couldn't sleep. Worse, the whispers had started. At first, just murmurs. In clubs, behind his back. Didn't he steal that chair from his mother? In Surler, they say she can't even walk now. Someone tagged him in a post. Dan Million turned Mama into scrap metal. He deleted it. Blocked the user. But the shame stuck like a stain. Still, he didn't go home. Pride had swallowed guilt. And then, one night, pride crashed. Literally. He was drunk. His friends were louder than usual, hyping him as he stumbled into the driver's seat of the Mercedes. He turned the key, music thundering from the speakers, tires screeching into the night. The city flew past in a blur of neon and rain. Then a flash, a screech, a sickening crunch. The car twisted like paper. Daniel woke up in a hospital bed, head pounding, leg in agony. His right leg had been crushed in the crash. Doctors called it a miracle that he'd survived, but there would be no full recovery. He would need assistance. He would need a wheelchair. That was the moment the silence became unbearable. They rolled in a basic hospital chair, metal cold, plastic thin, handles worn. It screeched when it moved. Daniel stared at it for minutes without breathing. He remembered the one he had sold. The ribbon underneath. The custom frame. The scratch from the mango tree in their old yard. He had traded his mother's freedom for fame. Now he needed the very thing he had stolen from her. And it wasn't coming back. Days passed in a fog of painkillers and broken sleep. His phone, once a source of constant buzzing, was silent. The friends were gone. The girls vanished. Even the men who once promised deals didn't answer his calls. No one came. Except her. One afternoon, as the ceiling fan spun lazily above his head, Agnes appeared at the door of the ward. She was thinner, older, but her eyes had fire. She leaned on a borrowed stick, her steps slow but full of purpose. She said nothing as she walked to his bedside. Just sat, watched, listened to the beeping machines. Daniel's voice cracked. "Mama." He tried to sit up, but pain stopped him. Agnes placed her hand on his arm, closed her eyes, prayed softly. Not for him, not aloud, but for strength. She came every day after that. She never raised her voice, never asked about the money, never demanded an apology. She just sat, cleaned his forehead, brought him food, rubbed his hands when they trembled. Daniel mistook it for forgiveness. He didn't know that Agnes had already contacted Ez's old friend, that a veteran's lawyer was working on a case behind the scenes, that she was building her own kind of justice, not with anger, but with documents, names, witnesses, receipts. Each visit was a brick in her foundation. Each prayer, a layer in her strategy. Daniel thought her silence meant peace. But her silence was the sound of something far more powerful. Preparation. The taxi ride back to Surler felt longer than the entire year Daniel had just lived. He sat in the back seat beside his mother, leg braced stiffly in front of him, crutches leaning awkwardly against the door. The car smelled of old dust and stale air freshener. The windows were rolled down, but the breeze did little to cool the silence. Agnes didn't speak. She didn't ask how he was feeling. She didn't scold or sigh. She just stared out of the window, her face calm and unreadable, her fingers tapping slowly against the handle of her stick like a metronome marking time. Daniel wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat like stones. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought I was doing it for us." But what did apologies mean when the betrayal had been broadcast on national TV? The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of memory, of loss, of disappointment so thick it pressed against his chest. When they reached the old bungalow, Daniel felt smaller than he ever had. Gone were the marble floors of Lecky, the velvet-lined lounges, the endless praise. The yard looked shabbier than he remembered. The paint on the gate peeled like old skin. The weeds in the front yard swayed like witnesses waiting to testify. Agnes stepped out first, her back straighter than her age should allow. She opened the front door, stepped inside, and said simply, "Come." Daniel limped in, head bowed. Inside, nothing had changed. The same wooden table. The tin box still resting on the shelf. The framed photo of her and EZ, slightly tilted, still catching the last light of the afternoon. She had cleared out a small room for him. A thin mattress. A pillow that smelled of sun. A basin of water on the floor. He said nothing. She pointed. "You can rest here." Then she walked out. Days passed. Agnes moved through the house like a quiet wind. Cooking, sweeping, praying. She greeted him each morning with a simple nod. Not a smile. Not a glare. Just acknowledgement. Daniel tried to help. He swept once. Burned the rice once. Tried to fix a leaking pipe and made it worse. Each time, she said nothing. But her silence wasn't cruel. It was purposeful. He started hearing her at night. Low murmurs through the thin walls. Not cries. Not prayers. Conversations. Once, he caught a name. "Yes, Barrister O'Tunla." Another night. "Yes, the footage is still saved." And another. "His admission is on camera." His stomach twisted. What was she doing? One afternoon, a knock came at the gate. Daniel limped outside, expecting a neighbor. But instead, a delivery truck stood there. Two uniformed men carefully unloaded a large wooden crate. They carried it into the parlor, set it down gently, and left without a word. Agnes stood beside it. She didn't call him, didn't explain. She picked up a small crowbar, cracked the crate open with deliberate movements. Inside lay a wheelchair. Not the old one. A new one. Shining. Sleek. Strong. Custom built. Steel frame. Cushioned seat. Adjustable footrests. Modern. Dignified. She ran her hand along the armrest. Tears filled her eyes. "This one," she whispered, "was bought with justice. Not betrayal." Daniel stepped back. "Mama," he started. But she raised a hand. He stopped. Then came another knock. This time, it was a man in a crisp navy suit. Slim, precise, briefcase in hand. He greeted Agnes with a warm, "Good afternoon, madam." She nodded. "Barrister, meet my son, Daniel." The man turned to him with polite detachment. "Mr. Daniel, everything is ready. The case will be filed in court next week." Daniel's mouth went dry. "Case?" Agnes turned to him. "Yes," she said. "A court case. For theft. For fraud. For selling what was not yours." He stumbled back, as if the word had struck him. "You're suing me?" Her voice was calm, but each word landed like a drumbeat. "You sold my body, my dignity, my history, for applause. And you thought my silence meant weakness." She looked him dead in the eye. But silence can be a weapon too. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The mattress felt like concrete. His body still ached. But what kept him awake wasn't pain, it was panic. He saw the courtroom in his mind. The judge, the cameras, his mother on the stand, speaking the truth to a city that once called him a success. He tried to tell himself she wouldn't go through with it. But he knew better. Agnes was not bluffing. Her silence had been preparation. And now, the world would hear her. The day the court date was announced, the internet exploded. A popular blogger posted a teaser. Dan Million faces legal battle with own mother over auction scandal. Comments poured in. "I knew that guy was too slick. Imagine selling your disabled mom's wheelchair. Lagos will humble you quick." Reporters hovered outside the bungalow. Microphones poked through the gate. Photographers captured Daniel's limp as he walked to buy bread. He stopped going outside. The same people who once screamed, "Dan Million," now looked at him like a cautionary tale. But Agnes? She moved with quiet fire. She met with lawyers, gathered her witnesses, signed affidavits, prayed in the morning, drafted statements at night. She no longer looked like a woman waiting. She looked like a soldier's widow reclaiming her name. One Sunday, the pastor preached on betrayal. He didn't mention names. But everyone in the congregation turned and looked at Daniel, sitting alone at the back, head bowed. He felt the weight of every "I like stones" on his back. One evening, he knocked on her door. She was sitting by the window, Bible in her lap. "Mama." She looked up. "I know I hurt you. I was blind. Greedy. Please don't do this. Give me a chance." Her eyes were steady. the lines on her face deep like the rings of an old tree. "Daniel," she said, "forgiveness is in my heart, but justice must be in the world." She stood slowly, walked over to him. "What you did was not just to me. It was to every mother who sacrifices, every widow who prays, every child who forgets the weight of love." She rested her hand on his shoulder. "You will stand in court, and I will speak, and whatever the world decides, let it be." The courtroom in Acadia was packed before the judge even entered. People stood shoulder to shoulder in the gallery. Reporters with badges and notepads jostled for space. Cameras clicked like distant lightning. Vendors outside sold puff-puff and newspapers with screaming headlines. "Agnes versus Dan Million. The trial begins. Betrayal or misunderstanding. The wheelchair scandal goes to court. Mother's dignity on trial." Daniel sat in the dock, pale and silent. His crutches leaned beside him like weary witnesses. His once proud shoulders were slumped. His fingers trembled slightly. The judge entered, a stern man with gray eyebrows and a gaze like glass. When he spoke, the room silenced instantly. Court in session. Agnes entered like a wave of quiet power. She wore a crisp blue ankara, her scarf tied with firm precision. Her stick tapped the floor gently, echoing through the hall. The crowd parted for her like water around a stone. She did not look at Daniel. She walked straight to her seat, back straight, eyes forward. Beside her sat Barrister Otunla, composed, collected, prepared. Daniel watched his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Not frail, not broken, unshakable. The prosecutor, a lean man with fire in his tone, stood. "My lord, this case is both simple and grave. A son, entrusted with the care of his mother, a widowed, disabled woman, chose greed over blood. He stole her wheelchair, sold it without consent, and paraded himself as a hero while his mother suffered in silence." He turned to the gallery. "Today, we bring the truth to light." Daniel's lawyer, a young man with uncertain eyes, stood next. His voice was steady, but lacked weight. "My lord, my client admits he acted without wisdom, but he did not act with malice. He believed he was elevating his life, and eventually hers. He regrets his actions. He asks the court to see this not as a crime, but a desperate misstep of a lost son." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Agnes was called to the stand. The crowd leaned in. She raised her right hand, swore her oath, said slowly, "My name is Agnes Adebayo," she began. Her voice was soft, but the hall heard every word. "I was married to Staff Sergeant Ezekiel Adebayo. Before he died, he sold his hunting rifle to buy me a wheelchair. He called it my throne. It was more than metal. It was my legs, my pride, my husband's last gift." She paused, swallowed. "My son Daniel knew this. He lived in that house. He saw me tie a ribbon under the seat the day Easy died. He saw me stroke the handle every night before sleep." She looked up. "One night, he took it, while I slept. He said nothing, and days later, I saw it on television. Sold. For $1 million. The gallery gasped. Daniel shut his eyes. "I do not want his money. I do not want his punishment. I want the world to understand that when you take dignity from a woman who is nothing else, you don't just rob her of comfort, you rob her of being." Silence followed. Even the judge's pen stopped moving. Then Daniel was called. He limped to the stand, leaning heavily on his crutches. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. When he swore his oath, his voice shook. "My lord, I did it. I sold the chair." Murmurs echoed through the room. "I thought I was fixing everything. I thought if I could just make it, if I got rich enough, it would erase the shame. I was wrong." He glanced at his mother for the first time. She was always strong. I was the weak one. I betrayed her. I betrayed myself. The prosecutor stood, sharp as a blade. "Is it true you spent the money on luxury? Cars, watches, alcohol parties?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." "Is it true you mocked your neighbors when they questioned you?" "Yes." "And is it true you told a reporter, 'What's one wheelchair compared to 1 million?'" Daniel's voice cracked. "Yes." Gasps again. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Witnesses came forward. Mama Titi spoke, voice trembling. "I watched Agnes drag herself to the veranda on a stool. She didn't eat for days. She didn't cry. She just stared." Pastor Jude added, "She never asked for pity. Only silence. Only strength." The auction house manager admitted Daniel never mentioned sentimental value. He said it was custom-made. but nothing about it belonging to his mother. Then came the twist. Agnes's lawyer produced frozen bank records. My lord, at the plaintiff's request, the auction funds have been frozen by court order. She asks that it not be returned to her, but used to create a foundation. For widows. For disabled mothers. The crowd erupted. A woman in the back sobbed. A reporter dropped his pen. Agnes nodded quietly, hands in her lap. If my son cannot honor me, she said, let strangers benefit from what he took. Daniel stared at her, eyes wide. He had not expected this. He thought she wanted revenge. She wanted legacy. The judge called for recess. Reporters flooded the compound. Phones lit up. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Agnes. Hashtag honor your mother. Hashtag Dan Million scandal. When the session resumed, the judge's voice was measured and grave. This court has seen the evidence. The theft is clear. The damage is clear. But we also see remorse. He looked at Daniel. You have lost more than wealth. You have lost honor. Then he turned to Agnes. Madame Adebayo, your dignity shines brighter than this court deserves. Your request has been noted. He raised his gavel. This court orders the $1 million from the auction to be transferred into the Agnes Foundation for widows and disabled mothers. Furthermore, Daniel Adebayo is sentenced to 2 years of supervised community service at the foundation, effective immediately. The gavel fell. The room exploded in noise. Some clapped. Some wept. Some shook their heads. Daniel fell to his knees, crutches clattering to the floor. Tears ran down his face. He looked at his mother. Mama, he whispered, I'm sorry. She stood slowly, walked to him, looked down at her son, broken and bent. I forgave you long ago, she said. But forgiveness does not cancel consequence. She placed her hand on his head, not in comfort, but in truth. You will serve. You will work. And one day, perhaps, you will become the man your father prayed for. 2 weeks after the court's verdict, the gates of the newly registered Agnes Foundation for Widows and Disabled Mothers swung open for the first time. The building was modest but proud. Pale yellow walls. A green roof. Ramps instead of stairs. Wide hallways painted in calm colors. A sign stood tall at the entrance. Dignity is not a luxury. It is a right. Below it, in smaller print. Founded by Agnes Adebayo. Funded by the repentance of one. For the healing of many. Inside, mothers in headscarves moved slowly down polished corridors. Some held sticks. Others were wheeled in by volunteers. Laughter and gospel music floated through the air like incense. In one room, widows learned tailoring. In another, women sat in a circle, learning to use laptops for the first time in their lives. And outside, in the sun, sweeping the courtyard, hauling boxes, arranging chairs, was Daniel. No longer Dan Million. Just Daniel. The first days of community service were brutal. Not because the work was hard, but because everyone knew who he was. Some looked at him with disgust. Others with pity. A few said nothing and just stared. Every label he once wore, genius, influencer, icon, was gone. Now he was just the boy who sold his mother's soul for $1 million. And lost it all. But Agnes did not mock him. She did not shame him. She made sure he worked. She gave him small, steady responsibilities. Sweeping leaves. Fixing hinges. Carrying supplies. And she watched. Not like a warden. Like a mirror. At night, Daniel slept in a small room at the back of the building. A fan whirred overhead. A radio played old Yoruba hymns on low volume. He thought about everything he had done. The ribbon under the wheelchair. The tin box of medals. The photo of his parents in love. The day he had stood by her bedroom door and whispered lies to himself. He wept often. Quietly. Into his pillow. No more parties. No more interviews. Just the scraping sound of a broom and the heaviness of consequence. One evening, after a long day hauling new wheelchairs into the storeroom, Daniel saw a woman struggling to lift herself from a bench. She had one leg and crutches by her side. Her wrapper was neatly tied, her face lined with years of weather and grief. Without thinking, he rushed to her side. Let me help. He lifted her gently into the nearest wheelchair, adjusted the footrest, pulled the straps carefully. When she looked up at him, her eyes shimmered. God bless you, son, she whispered. I haven't sat this straight in years. Daniel didn't reply, but something shifted in his chest. Not pain, not shame, something warm, light. That night, he approached his mother. She was watering flowers in the front garden. Mama, he said quietly. She didn't turn around, just kept watering. I helped a woman today. Into a chair. She smiled. It wasn't forced. It was real. Agnes placed the watering can down. Turned. Daniel's eyes were soft. For the first time, he said, I understood. The chair wasn't just a thing. It was a door. He knelt slowly, his knee pressing into the soil. I was blind. But now I see. Agnes looked at her son, kneeling like the boy he once was. She reached out, placed a hand on his shoulder. I prayed for this, she said. Not for riches. Not for crowds. For this moment. When your heart would wake up. They stood there for a long time. Mother and son. Sunset behind them. Soil beneath them. Healing between them. Word of the foundation spread quickly. Churches spoke of it in sermons. Teachers shared the story in classrooms. Mothers told their children before bed, respect is not earned with noise. It is earned with action. Daniel became the face of caution. Agnes, the voice of redemption. Pastors quoted her. If silence is a weapon, wisdom is the aim. Politicians visited. Donors offered support. But Agnes refused to let the place become a circus. This is not a brand, she told them. This is a balm. 1 year passed. Daniel continued his service. Even after the 2-year order was halved for good behavior. He no longer wore gold chains. He no longer needed applause. He led workshops for young men. Taught them the cost of shortcuts. He swept floors, but also sat with new volunteers and shared his story, not with drama, but with truth. When people asked him how he fell so far, he answered plainly, I betrayed my mother's trust. But I'm working to earn it back, 1 chair at a time. Agnes lived to see hundreds of women move again. Not just physically, emotionally. They stood taller, smiled fuller. Some called her Mama Freedom, but she remained Agnes, the woman who tied a ribbon to a wheelchair and taught a city that justice is not revenge, it is restoration. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, stamped with the seal of the original auction house. Agnes sat in her office. Yes, she had one now, though she rarely used it, when Daniel brought it to her. From Victoria Island, he said. They forwarded it. She opened it slowly. Inside, a typed note. Dear Madam Agnes, the buyer who purchased your original wheelchair has requested to meet you in person. He claims he has something important to return. Will you accept? Agnes read it twice. Daniel looked at her. What could he possibly want? She stared out the window. The sky was streaked with gold. Perhaps, she said softly, the story isn't finished yet. That evening, as the last rays of sun spilled into the garden, Agnes sat in her new chair, the one bought with dignity, not betrayal. Daniel stood beside her, silent. And they both looked out toward the horizon, not at what was lost, but at what might still come. If this story moved you, share it. Comment below where you're reading from. And subscribe for more stories that show the power of truth, healing, and hope. Because some chairs carry more than people. They carry stories. They carry justice. And sometimes, they carry redemption.